renewal of mind and reconfiguration of our thoughts that we are able to position ourselves to receive all the blessings that God has set aside for us. For it is not us who are waiting for the blessing, but rather the blessing that is waiting for us to be in the right frame of mind to receive it. I hear a clarion call. It's time to rise and shine. Time to get what's mine. Yeah.
Dai, you family, and welcome to another special message from the Ancient Ones. My name is Dr. Mumbi Saraki. How you doing? How's everything going? I really do pray that you are well in all your ways, family, and that you're moving into your own narrative, because it's only your narrative that will act as a vehicle from the thoughts and narratives of this world to the thoughts and narratives of the true reality, family, which is the new earth that is emerging, which is your real inheritance. But those are stories for other days. I'm so grateful to every single person that supports us through Patreon and, through PayPal, through love donations. Definitely consider supporting us, family. We do share way more information on Patreon. And for everyone who donates to us, there is always a special gift in the mail. The information just now, what the ancestors are saying now, like the kind of information they're moving to, family, is on the next level. Is on the next level. And I really do, I don't even want to say wish, but I encourage each and every one of us to work to get to those levels, because there's so much information that I need to share with you that I just can't, because there's a few people slacking, and I'm trying to see how I'm going to do that. Because this is still kindergarten information that I'm sharing here, family. When they're giving me PhD level downloads. So you can see how this is a fraction of the information we have. And my prayer is that we will be able to share more of that information with more of our people in the months and years to come, because that's where the real shift in consciousness will happen. But for now, people ain't ready. But there's one interesting download, if I can call it that the Ancient Ones gave me, and it was talking about polygamy, because I've had a question about polygamy for so long, especially knowing that this was a feminine planet. The women came before men. Actually, the man and the woman were one thing, but it was the shape of a woman who could literally procreate without man, and then there was a splitting. And a lot of people have asked, how did we as an African people get to polygamy? And you see, polygamy is something that came around in a different time, family. And it came about because our peoples, were the first to experiment in putting certain genes together and creating superhumans and creating supermans and superwomans and creating these superly, gifted children. And how polygamy started, because before it was basically just, and I'm talking mainly about East Africa, it was mainly like with the royal bloodlines that we would see a king having several wives. Sometimes it was with the shamans, where the shamans would have a few wives. But they didn't take relationships and partnerships. First of all, the whole marriage thing was not how we see it now. But what happened is that there were certain seeds that certain gifted women would want, or certain families would want. And that's why even in the scriptures, family, in the Old Testament, which is our story, we see how a king would join two nations together by marrying the daughter of the king or queen of the, neighboring nation. And that would bring them together. So that was kind of why polygamy came about. And it would be like, great warriors, those of royal bloodlines. And royal bloodlines weren't just like you're born to this name. No, it was like you had certain traits. Your bloodline had cultivated a certain higher consciousness. that other bloodlines were not quite there. So you were the leaders, you were the teachers, you were the priests. And so women would want to join their seed or get the seed from these men. Our ancestors were highly sophisticated family. And then there was a fall. And so now everything got distorted, including polygamy. Where now everyone thought it was about the man getting all these women, and it was never about that. Because even in the Agikoyo nation family, a woman may choose to marry into a certain family so that they can bring their families together, or maybe they have a certain gene pool that, that is not in this family. But she would not be the property of that man. Of course, she'd exist within his household. So he was basically like a stud. He was basically like a bull. That's the whole situation. Because the women ran the compound, and the man stayed in his own hut, and the women and children stayed, and the animals stayed in their own huts. This is even when we'd been distorted. And the man was the one who was now providing the seeds when the women needed it. He wasn't the one dictating anything. And I mean, among the Agikoyo, because of the high levels of witchcraft family back then, especially when the distortion came and we fell, the dark wizards, or whatever you want to call them, they went into overdrive and they kind of took over the nations. And so it was even customary for a woman to go and have a child with a man that was not her husband. And that was her secret. She never told the husband, although he knew it was going to happen. So that if a certain spell or a certain spiritual or psychic attack happened and the entire family was wiped out, the one who had a different bloodline would survive. And this is deep. Some people are not going to get it, and that's fine. And if you're not getting it, keep it moving, family. Don't even stress yourself. So the level of relationships was on a much higher vibe, family. There was not this jealousy and envy and you cheated and you did this. It's so low vibe. Because it wasn't for that. Everyone was an individual building their nations. And the women realized when they came together. That's why you'd see a chief, like I think my great-grandmother, who lived to be 102 or 108. She was like one of 22 wives, family. And I always wondered that, because she was always so striking and like strong and mystical. I think she was a kind of medicine woman or something, family. And she just didn't seem the kind that was sold to someone and forced to marry them. No, it was not that kind of situation. And that wasn't the vibe. Even my grandmother, who was the third wife, she always spoke fondly, even though they'd had the worst fights. Because my grandfather married three, let's just call them special women because I don't want to offend anyone, but if you get it, you get it. And of course, just three power women. Some were of the darkness, some were of the light. I'm not going to get too deep into it. But when I spoke to my grandmother, she spoke fondly of the other two wives. And the whole thing of relationship, of course she loved her husband, but it wasn't the Roman way. That's what romance is, family. It's a lower level interpretation of love. And I'm not saying, don't get married and whatever. But I'm just saying understand how our families and how our ancestors did it. And it was like, my grandmother once told me this story of how, before, when they were still in the village life. Now, this was before Christianity came and made my grandfather choose one of the three wives as his only wife. And that's when now the whole thing of women started. The major discrimination and dissension among women started, family. The separation of women, because the men were made to feel by the ignorant invaders that they were the all-powerful ones in the community when they were like literally just studs, and the women were the ones running things. But my grandmother was telling me a story about how, like, if the guests, if her husband's male friends came to visit from out of town, because people would travel so far, like in the villages and stuff, there'd be these big banquets and everyone would hang out. And if one of the husband's friends hit it off with one of his wives, they could go and make love that night. They could go and share a hut that night. And he would literally just have to leave his spear outside just to alert the husband and others that, the room was occupied. So you can see they were on a much higher level of consciousness, family. And the only reason us as Africans fell from that is because we now wanted to do Muzungu stuff. Our daughters didn't understand because you see, like, there was a splitting of generations, like now in my mother's generation. So the polygamy ended with my grandmother. And my mother, through the education and through the fact that now the female teachers became their role models, the female nuns, and they talked so badly about polygamy, how religion started to promote it as, as a sin and all this stuff. And so people from polygamous families started to feel shame and embarrassment. And then now, the whole situation came now where it's so toxic with the mistresses and all this stuff. I'm not excusing any of this. Because I really think, family, that in the low vibration that we are today, we can't exist in that polygamous situation. Because now, not everyone is high vibing. A lot of us have lost our purity. And what's happening now, especially with this sneaky behavior of men, where they'll go and sleep with a prostitute, then they'll come sleep with a wife, then they'll go sleep with whoever, is like the man now, as a stud who thinks he's the one who's in control, is literally bringing all this toxic, low vibrational energy to not only his wife, and she'll actually give birth to that, because they say you've slept, not only when you're sleeping with someone, you're not only sleeping with that person, but you're literally sleeping with every person that person has slept with. Unless now they're in the spiritual vibes and they're doing the necessary spiritual cleansing and they clear their sexual energy and all that. But who's doing that, really? Especially in the Babylon system. And so the reason it's not working now is because men are getting all these women who have low vibing thoughts. Some are even doing witchcraft and wizardry, who are not pure, even in their hearts. And that's the energy that they're now spreading from one woman to another. Because you see, but this is next level, but I'm just going to stop here. When the women used to come together, and there would be one husband, let's say, all those women had all their powers. And the man, by sleeping with his various wives, would actually be spreading their powers amongst them and making them even more powerful. But people ain't ready for that one. Tuko pamoja.
I hear a clarion call. It's time to rise and shine. Time to get what's mine, yeah. And I want it all, beyond the riches of the world, to the promises of God for my life.